I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, equipment, and techniques. We're here on a shiny Monday morning in the studio, bright and early, quite a bit earlier than I really like to get up, and we're ready to roll. We've got some stuff laid out here for you. We've got our brand new workbench set up, so we have something to actually set things on and demonstrate to you. And without further ado, we will roll into the questions. Now, one thing I do want to comment on before we hit our first question is, this is a question and answer show, so obviously we can't go on without your questions. So as you're watching this, just keep in the back of your mind what good questions you may have, and jot them down, and whenever you get a chance, either post them in the comments section below, or send them to us on Twitter or Facebook. I don't know why you guys don't seem to like Twitter, but we get almost no responses across Twitter. So go over there, follow us, check it out. We're pretty active on our Facebook page, so take a look at that. And remember, there is a website, 8541tactical.com. We do post a lot of good information on there. A lot of times stuff that hits the website is not enough to actually make a video. So there's some decent articles over there that you won't see on our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching so far and making this a success up to the second episode. So here we go. Our first question is from Oyo. It's OYY0. It says, "Hey John, why Lone Wolf? Just wondering. Great video." Well, I'd like to be able to tell you that I picked up the call sign Lone Wolf by some wonderful story, some daring deeds, but the truth of the matter is, in 1983, Chuck Norris starred in a movie called Lone Wolf McQuade, and my last name is McQuay, so it just kind of stuck. The funny thing about it was I was originally stuck with that call sign before I ever got into a sniper platoon and before I ever became a sniper. So after I became a sniper and started working in smaller teams, it kind of seemed appropriate. Our next question is from Jailhouse RN. John, what are your thoughts on pivot/swivel type bipods versus a fixed bipod? Which would you recommend for most overall shooting, including hunting and competition? Thanks for your time and instruction. Well, Jailhouse, the bipod that I most recommend is definitely a swivel and notched leg version of the Harris BRMS. Now, if you're shopping for a bipod on the lower end of the price range, then this is a good bipod to go with. Do not get the standard tension knob adjusting legs, and this is why. When you go to set one of these bipods up in a competition or in any kind of fast situation, very often when you drop down, one leg will be in a hole and one leg will be on a high spot. It's very easy just to hit the button and let the leg slide out and lock. If you've got the legs all the way in on both sides, then when you get that up, they'll actually spring into position and lock, and then you can level it out. Also, as you can see here, these notches are not in very fine increments. They're pretty coarse. So you may get into a situation where the length you need is between a notch. In that case, you need the swivel to be able to level it out. Additionally, the swivel allows you to keep from needing to goof with the legs after every shot, because as you shoot, they're going to sink in at different rates, and you can just tilt it from side to side. Now, if you go with a Harris BRMS, a lot of questions I get are, what are the appropriate lengths for the bipods? They come in 6 to 9 and 9 to 13. 6 to 9 is my preferred bipod. The legs go out. Legs go out quite a good distance, higher than you really need for prone or for bench shooting. If you carry quite a bit of weight around your gut, then I've heard guys say that the 9 to 13 is a better choice for them. I would say that you'd have to really be in a situation where you can't get down low to be able to utilize a 9 to 13 in its lowest setting from the ground, and I can't really see many situations where you'd want to use it deployed to 13. So the 6 to 9 is my preference for a bench and prone bipod. If I'm not shooting bench or prone, if I'm shooting anything else, then I'm going to go to a tripod with a rest on top. And we'll get to those in a later video. One addition that we have covered before in our videos to the Harris bipods is the KMW pod lock down here. This allows you to either keep the bipod loose and let you set out your elevation, set out your cant quickly, or it allows you to lock it down to pretty much completely locked off, which I don't like. I like to keep mine set so I've got just a little bit of tension in it, but the rifle will stay wherever you leave it. Now, if you're not stuck on price range, if you can spend a little bit more money on a bipod, I would suggest going with the Atlas bipod by B&T Industries. I have an Atlas version 8 on our Accuracy International AE Mark II. It is an incredibly nice bipod. It does quite a few things that the Harris doesn't. The legs will set at 45 degrees forward, 45 degrees back. And the adjustment range seems to be a little bit greater than the Harris. It doesn't have a facility to totally lock it out like you do when you put a pod lock on the bipod, but that has never been an issue for me. Also, the legs will fold backwards against the forearm to be able to carry it a little bit easier and store it a little bit smaller. So if you are on a budget, the Harris BRM-S 6 to 9 is the way to go. If you're not on a budget, then the Atlas version 8 is where you want to be at. The Atlas version 8 does not have a sling stud mounting ability. You will have to put a Picatinny rail on something if you want to mount it, or if you have an AI chassis system, they make a spigot mount that mounts right in the front. Stealth Shooter 100 asks, what's your opinion on choke rifle stocks? It's time for me to get an aluminum bedded stock for my 700 ADL. Are there any other companies that make aluminum bedded stocks for the ADL besides choke? I really don't want to buy bottom metal. If I wasn't on a budget, I would just buy a BDL stock and a new floor plate. A new floor plate. Thanks. Well, Stealth, there are several companies out there that make replacement stocks for the ADL. I have some experience with the Choate Ultimate Series stocks. I'm not a big fan of them. They're a little bit heavier than they need to be. They're not very comfortable for me. Some people really like them. So that part's going to be personal preference. However, you're not pinned down to just those stocks if you want to keep your ADL system. Bell & Carlson makes a couple of different stocks that will fit your applications. We'll leave some links down in the bottom of the bar there on where you can pick them up and which style of stock will suit your ADL. Now, what I would recommend though is just ditch the ADL idea and go with a standard BDL type floor plate. You can pick BDL floor plates up on eBay in the $40 to $60 range. I don't know how tight your budget is, but to me $40 to $60 really is a good price for the added functionality that you'll get with a BDL floor plate. It's really nice, especially if you're shooting in any kind of structured environment, to be able to instantly drop that floor plate and clear the rifle. Now, when you replace the floor plate, you'll need to replace the floor plate and the internal box magazine. Many of the floor plate bottom metal kits that I see on eBay actually include the internal box magazine, but they're different between the ADL and the BDL, so you want to make sure that you have a BDL box magazine. Zombie Ready 556 asks, great work as usual. Do you think the Stevens 200 rifles could be a budget action base that could reach out to 800 to 1,000 meters for less money than a 700 action? The truth is, I don't have a whole lot of experience with the Stevens 200 actions. I know that they can be built into very accurate rifles. I don't think you would have any problems building one into a budget system. The advantage of the Stevens and the Savages for home builders is it doesn't really take any specialized machinery to be able to barrel one. You can buy pre-chambered barrels and buy the hand tools that you need to install a pre-chambered barrel onto your action. This allows you to quickly and easily change between calibers, and it allows you to change barrels when you burn one out fairly quickly. I'm very interested in the Stevens 200 action. We may entertain doing a build series on a Stevens 200 here in the future. So to answer your question, I have heard of them being built into extremely competent long-range rifles. I don't have any first-hand experience in actually building them yet. Mr. Cymax asks, thank you for the excellent work, learning a great deal. What would you recommend for a Remington 700 300 Win Mag in terms of stock? I can't seem to find anything in the long action department. Well, Mr. Cymax, there are tons of stocks out there for the long action 700. What you have to decide on is you have to decide on what your price range is. At the top end of the standard stocks, you have Manners and Macmillan. They both make long action stocks. In the chassis area, you have the XLR Evolution chassis, the Accuracy International, AICS, and AX chassis. You have, I believe, the Whiskey 3 chassis from Kinetic Research Group will be coming out in long action soon. So you have quite a few options there. On the lower end, if you're trying to save some money, then the H&S Precision comes in long action, and my favorite, the Bell & Carlson, they make them in long action as well. In the Bell & Carlson line, the long action offerings are a little bit fewer than the short action. Short action tends to be the most popular, but they've got some really nice stocks out there should you decide to go that way. So decide on your price range and then check the offerings from those companies out, and I think you'll be surprised about what actually is out there for the Remington long action. Darth Colossus asks, hey, I'm looking for some good glass that's not going to break the bank. I've been looking at the Millet LRS-1. It's in the $400 price range, and from what I've heard, it's pretty solid. What are your opinions of it if you have ever ran into one, and do you have any other good alternatives around that price range? Well, the Millet LRS-1 is a second focal plane scope. I believe it's in the 6 to 24 power range. I haven't actually run one. The specs on the scope look pretty decent for that price range for the second focal plane target scope. However, second focal plane is really not my preference for a scope in that power range. If you're serious into long-range tactical style shooting, then I really suggest sticking with a first focal plane reticle. In that same price range, you can get into the Falcon Menace line, which I've had some great experience with the Falcon 4 to 14 that I mentioned before. It's been a very durable scope for us. It's been accurate and it's worked very well. That is something I would suggest you stick with if you're really serious about long-range practical type shooting. From Facebook, Joshua Abrams asks, when testing hand loads for stability, 223 in this case, what's the optimum range to use to make sure that they're stabilizing? I'm using a 75 grain round in a 1 in 9 twist barrel. I'm trying to get accuracy out to 600 yards, but I can only find 100 yard ranges in my area. Is 100 yards enough? Thanks. Well, basically on bullet stability, there are two things that you want to look at. You want to look at the stability of the bullet at the muzzle as soon as it comes out of the rifling. That's going to tell you if the rifling is spinning the bullet fast enough to stabilize it. The easiest way to do that is go about 10-15 yards out, far enough out that you're not going to blow the face of the target off the target stand, and set a target out there. Shoot through it and check to make sure you're getting nice, perfectly round holes. If you're getting perfectly round holes, then that tells you that the bullets are coming out of the barrel straight and they're stabilized. Now, the second thing you need to be aware of is downrange at the transonic range, where the bullets are dropping from supersonic to subsonic speeds. Some bullets pass through this transition a whole lot better than other bullets. The 168 grain Sierra in the 30 calibers, it gets a bad rap because it doesn't stay very stable when it goes transonic. They tend to tumble and wobble and do all kinds of weird stuff. If you ever shot on the or ever pulled targets on a 1,000-yard line with a shooter shooting a 168 grain gold medal match, you'll notice that most of the holes are oblong. Some of them are actually sideways. You can actually get a profile of the bullet going through the target. This is because once they pass through that the sound barrier again, once they go transonic, they tend to wobble and tumble. Now with a 223 at 600 yards, you're not likely to be dropping subsonic with any kind of standard velocities. So my suggestion to you would be test your bullets at the barrel, or at the muzzle, test your bullets at 100 yards, and if you're getting nice round holes at both of those ranges, you can be sure that the bullets are going to be stable until they hit the transonic range downrange. If you want to know what the transonic range is going to be, it varies based on environmental conditions. The speed of sound differs depending on altitude, temperature, pressure, all those things. So what you need to do is get a ballistic calculator like Bullet Flight, KAC, or Ballistic FTE, or you can go on JBM Ballistics online and punch in what your weather conditions are and what your speed of your load and your bullet you're using, and it will tell you where the bullet's going to go transonic, so that gives you a good idea. Generally, for target shooting purposes, you want to keep your bullet supersonic at the target. That will give you the best accuracy. Patrick on Facebook asks, should I spend a lot of money on rifle and scope and only my shooting ability is showing, or a fair amount on rifle and scope and progress as my ability advances? Well, Patrick, what I generally recommend to people is if you have the budget available, buy the best you can starting out. If you have the cash to buy an Accuracy International and top it with a Schmidt & Bender scope, you are going to be money ahead in the long run because you will not need to upgrade that platform. Notice I said not need. You may want to upgrade the platform, but you won't need to upgrade it. It'll do just about anything that you need to do within the envelope of that caliber. Now, a lot of people, though, getting into the sport, they're not really sure if it's for them. They don't want to go out and dump $10,000 on a rifle system, or they just don't have the means to do it. If you don't have that kind of income or that kind of disposable income, you're paying other kind of bills, then it's understandable that you're not going to want to spend that kind of cash. For those kind of people, then we need to look at what we have or what we can get that is sufficient in that budget range. That's one of the reasons we started the Budget Precision Project, to demonstrate that you don't need to drop a whole lot of cash to get a system that will challenge your skill level. Now, if you start out with a lower end system, a beginner platform, then you'll notice as time progresses that you will be able to shoot the platform to its mechanical ability. If you've got a 3/4 MOA rifle, you'll get to a point where you realize that 3/4 MOA is the smallest groups that you can possibly shoot. That's how you know that your skill level has gotten to the point where the rifle is holding you back. Then it's time to upgrade equipment and go to something better. Once you get up into a rifle that can shoot 1/4 inch 5-shot groups at 100 yards every time you lay down behind the rifle, that's going to be something that's going to challenge you, because then you need to push yourself and change your training up a little bit to put more stress on you as you're shooting. So if you're starting out and you have the ability to go big, then do so. You won't need to waste money selling used gear later on or trying to upgrade. If you don't have the money to go big in the beginning, then you can still start out with an entry-level system and progress as your skill level progresses, and you'll be good to go. Walter Pappas on Facebook asks, I've heard that for every 20 degrees in temperature change usually equals a 1 MOA change in bullet point of impact, with the bullet striking low in cold weather and high in hot temperatures. How much do you agree with this rule of thumb? And the same goes for humidity. Well, Walter, the rule of thumb has been repeated over and over again. I've heard it everywhere from military to law enforcement schools, and I've heard a bunch of shooters on the firing line repeat it. I really don't like rule of thumbs in general, and I don't like this rule of thumb especially because it's almost totally false. You may be able to spend some time on a ballistic computer and plug in environmental factors and muzzle velocity and bullet type and end up with a combination that comes close to the rule of thumb. However, it just really doesn't hold water. Now, if you take out your ballistic calculator and plug in a standard 308 rifle shooting M118 LR, which is the basic military long-range sniper round right now, then you can look down through and see that there are very few places or very few ranges where this will actually hold true to the rule of thumb. Now we just pulled out KAC Bullet Flight, and we selected a standard profile, which was the M40A3 shooting the M118 LR, plugged in a standard set of environmental variables, and we checked what the drop was at 500 yards. Now looking at Bullet Flight on the iPhone, at 500 yards at 59 degrees Fahrenheit, we got 58.3 inches of drop, or 3.2 mils. Now when we change that to 79 degrees, with everything else exactly the same, we got 57.3 inches of drop, or 3.2 mils. Change it again to 99 degrees Fahrenheit, and you get 56.3 inches and 3.1 mils. So at 500 yards, you see that every 20 degree change is giving us 1 inch, not 1 MOA, because 1 MOA at 500 yards would be 5 inches approximately. It gives us 1 inch for every 20 degree change. So that works out to around 0.2 MOA. Now if we do the same exercise at 1,000 yards, and we'll just throw the screenshots of the phone up here, I'm not going to read through each one, you'll see that we average about 13 inches of change in drop per 20 degrees. That works out to around 1.3 MOA. I'm doing that off the top of my head instead of actually going through calculations. 1 MOA is 1.047 inches at 100 yards. So it's not exactly 1 MOA to 1 inch, but it's close for what we're doing here. Now, as you can see, this really isn't a good rule to use, since it can vary from, a quarter of what the rule is on the short side of things to 30% more on the long side of things. So not a good rule. What I would suggest you do is print out a drop table for your rifle for a couple of different spreads for 20 degrees. If you are shooting in the winter somewhere, have stuff from 0 up to 50 or 60 degrees. If you're shooting in the summer somewhere, say go from 50 up to 100 degrees. You can print out dope tables pretty small. If you have a stock pack on your rifle, stick them in a stock pack. If not, drop them in your data book. They're fairly easy to handle, and that's the lowest cost way to do it. The ballistic calculators are free online, so if you're watching this, I assume you have access to the internet, and you can go to JBM Ballistics and print out your drop tables and do so over a couple of different temperature ranges. Now, I prefer the iPhone or Android phones for ballistic calculators, but they have one great drawback to them, and that's they run on batteries. Electronic devices that run on batteries die in the field. Your battery power runs out, they get water intrusion in the cases and short out, they get smashed. It's amazing how much stuff you can destroy out in the field. So this brings us down to a question that we received on Sniper's Hide from M24 SWS. It says, can you talk about the adaptive FDAC field density accuracy calculator in regard to its accuracy and where it stands overall as a good product to the user? Well, what he's talking about is this little slide rule here from Adaptive Consulting and Training Services. This is the FDAC, the Field Density Altitude Compensator. I know that because it's printed right here across the top. Otherwise, I'd never remember it. I just call it the FDAC. What this handy little card does, it allows you to take your environmental variables. You need to know your temperature and your altitude, and then you can cross temperature and altitude on this handy dandy little chart here and get what your density altitude is. This is an environmental factor that tells you basically how dense the air is that's around you. Now, once you have your density altitude, Then you've got the nifty little slide rule here, and you slide it out until the window at the top corresponds with what your density altitude is. Once you've got that slid out and you've got it lined up, then all you have to do is go down the table here, and it'll tell you what your drop is and what your wind drift is at that yard range. Now, the only drawback to the FDAC is, since it's designed for the military, the first cards that they came out with are military base calibers. The one that I have in here right now is for M118 LR, which is 308, traveling at 2650 foot per second. This side is for mils, this side is for MOA, so it works either way, no matter what your scope adjusts in, no matter what your reticle is calibrated in. The kit that they initially sent us was for 308, and we've got 2700 foot per second, 2600 foot per second. So if you're shooting 175 grain Sierra or something close to that in a 308, then you're good to go. Adaptive has come out with several different cards for the FDAC, so you need to slide on over to their site, and we'll put a link below and take a look at what cards they have available. This is an excellent tool if you don't want to have to worry about it in the field, if you don't want to worry about batteries dying. Even if you have a ballistic calculator on your iPhone, it may be a good idea to pick up an FDAC to keep as a backup. Remember, we always assume that whatever we're relying on is going to fail. These are a great deal for military shooters that are out in the field. Several people I've talked to that actually run military courses, they hand them out to their shooters as part of the course because it's such an incredible tool to have. On Sniper's Hide, Brian Futch asks, can you give us your opinion on the cost versus benefits of recrowning a factory barrel? Well, the benefit is the crown on a barrel is the last thing that the bullet sees on its trip down range until it impacts the target. Crown is critical to the accuracy because it controls the way the gas flows around the bullet as it exits the muzzle, and it controls how evenly the bullet is touched by the barrel as it leaves. If you have a ding or a nick on your crown, it most definitely will affect accuracy. How much it affects accuracy depends on how bad the damage is. So if you have a barrel that has a ding, then you definitely want to get it recrowned. Now, if the cost is worth it, is going to depend on how much your smith is going to cost to have it done. I've been charged about 50 bucks to have a barrel professionally recrowned. That's where the barrel is actually chucked up in a lathe and the crown is cut on the lathe. If you have a gunsmith that's going to charge you a really cheap price, more than likely he's not actually going to put it in a lathe. He's just going to lap the barrel or lap the crown, and your results, you know, they're going to depend upon the skill of the guy doing it. And if it's worthwhile, is going to depend on how much life you believe is left in that barrel. On Sniper's Hide, G-Hog's Nightmare asks, could you do on comparing the flat spring versus the standard and why it's better? Maybe notes on if the buffer should be changed. I've read about it a few times, but haven't gotten mine changed around yet. Well, what he's asking about is the Tubbs flat wire recoil spring for the AR-10 and AR-15. I put one in our AR-10, and I can't say that I noticed a great deal of difference. The claimed advantages of the flat wire spring is longer life and quieter operation. Anybody that shot AR-15s for any amount of time knows about the sproing. When you pull the trigger, it sounds like a Daisy Red Ryder BB gun with the recoil spring springing around inside the buffer tube. Now, the flat wire spring is supposed to reduce that, and it's not really something that I've noticed in the AR-10 with our PRS stock on it, mainly because the PRS is a pretty beefy stock. It puts a lot of insulation between my cheek and that tube. We went to the flat wire spring just because I wanted to see if it was any quieter and if I saw any difference. On the actual performance of the rifle, I saw no difference at all. We have not gotten enough rounds down range on it to tell if there's going to be any difference in the life of the spring. As far as the The sound, it feels like it may be a little bit quieter in the actual operation when I'm chambering around. I can't tell any difference when I actually pull the trigger on a live round because things are moving so quickly. You do not need to use any different buffer when you use a flat wire spring. We're still using the same Armalite AR10 factory buffer in ours, so that'll work just fine. If you choose to run a Tubbs flat wire spring, I don't see really any drawbacks to it except removal of the spring from the system. When we go to remove the spring to field strip and clean the rifle, because the spring is flat instead of rounded, it doesn't ride over the detent very easily. What you end up doing when you go to remove the spring is you actually take the buffer out, and then you'll have to unscrew the spring out of the buffer tube. It makes it a little bit more fiddly. In all honesty, it's not something that needs to be done every time you fire the rifle, but you want to get down in there pretty regularly and make sure you're not getting carbon or other garbage built up. So it is a little bit more of a pain in the butt when you go to clean the rifle. Noah FN off of AR15.com asks, what do you look for in aftermarket triggers, particularly the Remington 700? And what's your opinion of the X-Mark Pro trigger Remington's currently supplying in some of their rifles? Well, Noah, my opinion of the Remington X-Mark Pro trigger is you may get a good one, you may get one that's just okay. They are serviceable triggers, they are low-cost triggers, and they do what they're intended to do. I have one that was extremely heavy out of the box. Once the trigger was properly adjusted, it didn't hold its adjustment very well. It wanted to creep back to the heavy side, which, if you're going to have a trigger failing on the heavy side is much better than the other options. I have one X-Mark Pro trigger that is on our budget precision rifle, which has been working extremely well. It was fairly decent out of the box. It was an X-Mark Pro adjustable. We dialed the trigger down just a little bit, and it works great. I have another X-Mark on my wife's rifle, and that one I adjusted it and it held its adjustment, and it's been working extremely well for us. Now, when I talk about what I look for in a trigger, we probably need to step back and go over the triggers that Remington has offered here in the past. I've got 3 of them laid out here in front of me. The first trigger I'll show you. Now, ignore this little zip tie that's just through there to hold the trigger together. You'll notice that it's got a little nub cut off here. The original triggers that Remington offered had a leg that came up that engaged the bottom of the bolt. What happened is when you put the trigger on safe, which is the position it's in now, that leg came up and engaged the bolt and wouldn't allow you to open the bolt. In order to unload the rifle, you had to put the rifle on fire. You could then operate the bolt and eject the round from the chamber. On rifles that were abused and not properly maintained, these triggers had a tendency to gum up, and the actual trigger bow itself down here would stick to the rear. When you went to put that rifle on fire, there would be nothing supporting the sear other than the safety lever. So when you placed it on fire, the sear would drop and the rifle would fire. This caused Remington to do a product recall, and what they were basically doing is the triggers would come in and they would cut the legs off. So now you could operate the safety independent of the bolt. You could then eject a round with the rifle on safe. The issue wasn't really an issue if you properly maintained your rifle. And, of course, if you use proper gun handling skills and never point your rifle at anything you don't intend to shoot, and assume every rifle is loaded. Now, after that, Remington redesigned the safety on the triggers so that it no longer had this leg to come up to engage the bolt. Internally, the triggers are almost exactly the same. The issue with operator maintenance, I think, is a key one. You have got to keep these triggers clean. You don't want to monkey around with them. If you don't know what the adjustment screws on these triggers do, don't mess with them. Make sure that if you have a gunsmith that wants to adjust your trigger for you, that he knows how to properly adjust them and perform a proper safety check when he's done. After Remington discontinued the original, we call these the pre-2006 triggers because 2006 is really the cutoff to where the old triggers stopped and the X-Mark triggers started showing up on the rifles. Now the X-Mark trigger, as you can see, is quite a bit different in external appearance from the old triggers. The X-Mark trigger has a completely redesigned safety system wherein when you place the rifle on safe, which is its current condition right now, there is a trigger blocking mechanism in here that doesn't allow the trigger to be operated. When you place the rifle on fire, the trigger block is moved, the trigger can now be operated. When the rifle is unsafe, the safety still supports the sear, but the trigger block keeps the trigger from slipping out from underneath it. So it keeps the parts in correct orientation until you place it on fire. I haven't heard of any problems with the new X-Marks. That doesn't mean there haven't been any. So only time will tell if we start to have the same kind of problems that we have with the other triggers. That being said, the X-Mark Pro and the X-Mark trigger, they're decent triggers for what they are. When you go to replace the trigger with something else, I suggest looking into something like the Timney 510. The Timney 510 also uses a trigger blocking safety. When you apply the trigger or you apply the safety on the Timney 510, it blocks the trigger and doesn't have any of the issues that the old Remington triggers had. I'm still a fan of the old triggers. I used them for a very, very long time and never had any problems with them. Proper maintenance was always done on them and the trigger will treat you well. Like anything mechanical, if you ignore it, it may come around and bite you in the butt. 40 Delta on AR15.com asks, what's the advantage or main purpose of a folding stock on a precision rifle? Is it just for easier carrying and storage? They seem kind of gimmicky to me. How do some of the brands perform in the real world? Well, 40 Delta, we have right here before us one of the Whiskey 3 folding chassis systems from Kinetic Research Group. I've also got some experience with the AI folding chassis systems, and I can tell you that those are most definitely not a gimmick. They have a very real purpose in the world. Now, for shooters who are on the civilian side and just shooting precision rifle matches, they are extremely useful because it allows you to place the rifle in a more compact package for carry and transport. When you are trying to fit all your gear into a rental car, carrying around a Pelican 1750 like I've got, which is the largest Pelican case they make, the longest long gun case they make, it's an incredible pain. It does not fit in the trunk of most rental cars. Even if I request a full-size car, very frequently they give me either a compact or they have to upgrade me to an SUV. So the ability to fold a rifle stock and fit it in a case that's about 2/3 the size is very, very handy. From a military or law enforcement standpoint, a folding stock allows you to make for a more compact package so that when you have it slung across your back, it's less noticeable. You can fit it in a wider variety of bags and cases that won't really be recognized as rifle cases. This allows you to a little bit lower profile insert and just draws less attention. Now, people misunderstand some of the purposes behind the folding stock. You're almost never going to fire a precision rifle with the stock folded. Folding or collapsible stocks on subguns are designed so that they can be easily carried, easily concealed, and quickly deployed in the same manner that you would deploy a pistol. Not going to do that with a precision rifle. You're not going to sling it out from underneath the suit coat, and you're not going to go blasting away one-handed with it. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to use a single-point sling on these things and run them like you would a subgun. So the primary purpose is carry and transport. Now, as far as how they perform, You have a wide range of folding stocks out there. I've tried to get my hands on as many different folding stocks as I can. Some of the recent notable ones have been the Whiskey 3, the Manners folding stock, which was just released at SHOT Show this year, the Eberly stock chassis system, and of course the Accuracy International offerings. Now, how they perform in the real world is actually very well. Between those chassis systems that I've described, I've had most time with the Whiskey 3 and the Accuracy International, and both of these systems lock up tight. The gold standard of a folding chassis is that when the stock is extended, you can't tell that it is not a fixed stock. It should feel just as rigid as a fixed stock. On the Accuracy International, this is definitely the case. When it locks out tight. It's got a fairly substantial thunk when you flip that stock out. Now on the Whiskey 3, if you saw our folding mechanism install video, which you can go check that out now, you'll notice that I stated that there was just a tiny bit of wiggle in the system once it was assembled. Well, after talking to Kinetic Research Group and seeing the factory assembled stocks at SHOT, we figured out where the problem was. Our folding mechanism came to us right off the bat before they had the kits ready to go out to shooters. They were very accommodating, and they rushed it out to us as quickly as they could. They did not include any epoxy in that kit, and there really weren't any instructions with it. We tore into it like kids at Christmas and threw that mechanism together on this chassis before I had a chance to talk to the guys at KRG. And they advised me after the fact that epoxy needs to be used when you assemble the folding mechanism on a previous fixed stock to glue this top tube here into the folding mechanism. Once you glue the top tube into the folding mechanism, it eliminates any play into the system at all. If you purchase a folding stock from KRG, it's already done at the factory, and there won't be any wiggle in the system at all. It will lock up bank vault tight. Now that we've isolated the problem on ours is as tight as can be. It locks out, and it's perfect. So, disregard my earlier comments in the install video. This chassis locks up tight, and it is extremely nice to use. There are some very, very cheap folding stock systems out there that are nothing more than injection molded plastic with a hinge in the middle of them. Stay far away from them. They are not a good option. They will not lock up tight. They'll wiggle, and they will detract from the shooting process. So stick with a quality folding stock and you'll be good to go. The Manners stock that we play with at SHOT, it locks up tight. The Eberly stock chassis system locks up very tight. These are all good options if you need a folding stock. If you don't need a folding stock, don't waste your money on the folding versions. Get a fixed version. Now, the last thing to pay attention to on a folding stock system is a lot of times the folding stocks, the chassis systems like this, put the cheek piece in the way of the bore of the rifle. So in order to clean it, you've got to do something to get a rod past this. If you have a fixed Accuracy International or a fixed Whiskey 3, then you're going to need to remove the cheek piece to be able to get your rod through. With the folding versions, it's very simple. You just hit the release, pull it to the side. Now you have clear access at the bore of the rifle. Just an added advantage of the folding stock. It may not be a reason to go with a folding stock over a fixed stock, but if you're weighing all the pros and cons, that's definitely a pro. Well, that's about it, folks. I want to apologize for our last episode. We got it out a little bit late. We had some things that tied us up, and we had to push it out a couple days late. This episode, I hope to get wrapped up and get it out this evening to you. So hopefully we will get it out on time. And as always, we need your questions. Go ahead and send them in to us, comment section below, or on Facebook or Twitter, and we will sift through them and put the best ones on next week's show. I also want to thank my wife for getting me the awesome t-shirt for the show. Honey Badger Just Don't Care. So if you guys have anything that you'd like to see on the show or any reviews that you would like to see, please also kick them to us in the comments section or on Facebook or Twitter. We look forward to doing more videos for you. And as always, if you like this video, make sure you click that little thumbs up button down below. Make sure you comment and please hit that subscribe button. More subscribers allows us to bring more videos to you. Thank you.